Now that I've started posting on social media, making videos and learning how to do that, um, with the help of my 14-year-old grandson, I've had some interesting associations lately. Um, I'm a clinical neuropsychologist, clinical psychologist, and have been for many years. I enjoy working with people who have mild cognitive impairment and developed a form of therapy known as crater therapy, and to help rehabilitate and reach more independence for people with mild cognitive impairment. And I've always been interested as a neuropsychologist and as someone who was interested in physiological psychology and in the human brain and its evolution in different species. Many, many years ago, I was very affected by a monograph that came out by Jason Brown, who is an American neurologist, a physiologist, who had taken some of Luria's ideas. And the really important thing that I got from his monograph on consciousness was that sensation, the act of perception in sensation, didn't occur in the primary transducers of energy. You don't see in your eye, you see in your occipital cortex, that portion of the brain that interprets and puts together what you see, and its connections to other areas in the brain to understand context and meaning. You don't hear in your ear, you hear in that part of temporal cortex that puts all that information together. The same thing is true of skin sensation and olfaction. And we don't hear in our sense organs. We hear and see and feel in our brain, particularly in the surface of our brain, the cortical areas. And his contention in this monograph was that what was actually happening was there's a physiological circuitry that brings different aspects of energy into our brains through these sensory transducers. And the brain puts two things primarily together. It senses the surround or the context, and it projects those out into the world. And the thing that we are focused on perceiving, the object, whether it's a sound, a hearing, a feeling, a touch, whatever it is, that is projected outward also. Or another way to put it, those are organized separately. The thing you are sensing or perceiving and the surround and that image is put together inside your brain, and at the final stage that is projected outward, and you perceive that as the real world. That notion of projection many, many, many years ago really interested me, because as a clinician I'd always thought of projection as just primarily a defense, a psychological defense, to protect people from anxiety, one of the ways in which we defend our ego. But this meant that projection was actually the primary way we perceive the world, through our sense organs. And that notion has stayed with me for many, many years. And I should tell you that Jason Brown's notions of how perception works are not widely accepted in the world of physiological cognitive psychology, at least that particular idea. But lately, as I've learned to delve into the world of social media with the help of my 14-year-old grandson, I think I mentioned that I had just learned, I had gone to him with a problem. And the problem was that if I went to either Facebook or TikTok, I began rapidly, I was interested in animal pictures and things, and I rapidly got every time I turned it on, I would see an abused animal being rescued, a starving, emaciated animal, a crippled animal, or it was horrendous. And I Googled how to get rid of these, and it said, well, hit the share button, the arrow that looks like the share button, and then put down, you'll get a bunch of selections and put down not interested. And momentarily that will change what you're doing. And so I did that, and lo and behold, I was able to get recipes and things that had to do with teaching, something I didn't know about, and other aspects of the internet and social media that I really like. Um, and I was telling my 14-year-old grandson about this, that I had discovered that, but that he said to me, "Oh yeah, Grandma, that's, the way in which you handle algorithms. If you change the algorithm's perception of you, you take control of it. And what you do is you pick something that's a polar opposite every now and then of what you're interested in, and it gives you a more balanced view. It gives the algorithm a modified view of what you're interested in," which was, I thought, an astounding perception for a 14-year-old who'd been raised using the iPhone. And so I began doing that. And I began finding these really interesting educational things about multiple dimensions between quantum physics and classical physics, um, and a whole series of teachings about there might be other dimensions besides the four we're familiar with, the three normal ones, and the fourth being Einstein's time, with discussions that there may be as many as possibly 11 or 12 of these, and there are other planes of existence, and you can talk about the mathematical possibilities of that. The very small and the very large somehow have not yet been integrated in physics. But that these notions of other dimensions or other levels of consciousness, if you want to think about it that way, or existence, that they have some interaction one with another, but where our brains are not adapted to perceive them, but we can reason and imagine them. And that made me think about Jason Brown again, because Jason Brown was talking about the nature of consciousness. If it's a physiologically created or physiologically based projection mechanism, then point of view becomes something crucially important. Modifying the point of view, modifying the perception with your cognitions, with your beliefs. That's all sort of an infrastructure of the mind beyond the physiology of neurons, and topographic architecture. And I began thinking about, what about these other dimensions and their relationship to the infrastructure of consciousness, where you can't perceive things, but you can mathematically reason. You could even look at consequences and outcomes and try and picture what was going on beyond your ability to perceive things. Um, anyway, interesting thoughts that it's an exciting time. Interesting thoughts in my own field. And I'm so grateful to my 14-year-old grandson, Trey, who's introducing these to me. And it's an area of excitement, something that I find really important to have in this time of crisis. The other thought that I had, sponsored by my recent engagement with social media, is the notion. In my early training, I did a lot of comparative psychology, and it was often the study of predator-prey relationships, the most classic one being in sort of evolutionary thought that the bat and the moth, its prey, tend to evolve, co-evolve. And so you have erratic patterns that the moth learns to fly a certain way to escape the bat, and the bat, through genetic mutations and behavioral patterns, learns to counter with its echolocation and strategies to feed itself. And it then behooves the species of moth that it's preying upon to engage in more evolution. And this is an ongoing, constant phenomenon. And it made me realize that I think we're in a time of coevolution right now. I know people are very, very upset about the whole idea of democracy as we know it, the institutions of American Democratic Republican failing and crashing with Project 2025's recent implementation or attempted implementation with an authoritarian leader who removes these democratic safeguards and rules a particular way, as if we were all a giant corporation on the values and processes that corporations use for making profit. And I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think that's what we're doing right now, is watching the crashing down of institutions that maybe needed to be modified because they don't fit yet in our coming age of AI and the impact of social media. They will evolve. Whether they're the moth or the bat is actually irrelevant. They will co-evolve. And ways will be found in the next administration that doesn't believe in Project 2025 how to modify those institutions so that they serve the common good and that they reflect the greater good for the greater number of people, ordinary people, and the redistribution of wealth and the limitations of minority. Minorities meaning minority rule or oligarchic rule, the curtailing the power of corporations and oligarchs. I think we're in the midst of that transition, and transitions are never nice. They're never safe. They're never slow. They are chaotic and intense, very rapid change. None of us are comfortable with rapid change, whether it was for good or evil, but certainly not. Just the sheer speed of it is not helping. But I think a slightly longer view is helpful. We're co-evolving, and we've always been a beacon of hope about democracy, and we will continue to remain so as we shake off yet another one of the cycles of despair or the cycles of where things aren't working correctly. We didn't start as a nation with social safety nets and the belief in the common man and that the pursuit of happiness and dignity belong to all. But we're clearly there now in terms of wanting that. We just now need societal structures that will reflect our political will. And this too shall come. Just as the current chaos, this too shall pass.